was stayed on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind. My mind is what stayed on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind. It was stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Where you walk, walk, or where you talk, talk, but with your mind on freedom. Walk, walk, talk, talk, with your mind on freedom. Gonna give the call and you give the response. We just changed some words from a song that we all sang in the church. You know, we said, certain the Lord, certain the Lord, you know. And instead of saying we love King Jesus, because all of us did, we just said, do you want your freedom? Certainly, Lord. Do you want your freedom? Certainly, Lord. Do you want your freedom? Certainly, Lord. Certainly, 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 Lord. Will you fight for your rights? Certainly, Lord. Will you fight for your rights? Certainly, Lord. Will you fight for your rights? Certainly, Lord. Certainly, 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 Lord. In the spirit of Family Lou, it seems as if y'all done got too old, too tired, or whatever. And if you're not, let's stand on our feet. And let's do this like we should do it. Let's do it like we mean it. Do you want your freedom? Certainly, Lord. Do you want your freedom? Certainly, Lord. Do you want your freedom? Certainly, Lord. Certainly, 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 Lord. Will you go to jail? Certainly, Lord. Will you go to jail? Certainly, Lord. Will you go to jail? Certainly, Lord. Certainly, 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 Lord. Didn't do 30 days. Certainly, Lord. Didn't do 30 days. Certainly, Lord. Didn't do 30 days. Certainly, Lord. Certainly, 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 Lord. Do you want your freedom? Certainly, Lord. Do you want your freedom? Certainly, Lord. Do you want your freedom? Certainly, Lord. Certainly, 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 Lord.
Hi everyone, my name is Diamia Foster and I attended the University of Florida from the years of 2010 to 2014. During my freshman year, I got the opportunity to attend the annual SPOP trip to the Mississippi Delta where I got to meet Margaret Block. And this was during my freshman year with PhD students, individuals who this is their career as well as have a passion for it. And I was just very new to it, very new to the experience, but it was granted to me and I took it. And I'm very grateful that I took that chance to go learn with these amazing people as well as meet the legendary Margaret Block. For me, my perspective will have to be that every individual and every student should get this opportunity. With the education system we have in our country, there's not a lot of truth being told about the true history of America and the true Black American experience as well as history in this country. So to be able to have that firsthand, be able to hear the true stories, be able to hear what they did in order to make our country what it is today and what we're hoping it will become more of, was very impactful for me and really changed the way that I see history, really changed my experience as a Black woman in this country, and as well as impacted the way that I share my history and the pride that I have behind my history with my family and my friends. I think the most memorable interview for me would have to be when Margaret Block, it's so funny, it's still so funny to me, when she shared about how they would make their Molly cocktails, put the alcohol with the fire in the bottle, with the cloth hanging out, and they would throw it at the police in order to protect themselves and Although, of course, very dangerous, still very funny to me because it was what they had to do, and it was what they were willing to do, and how they were willing to risk their lives in order to see a change and to see a difference. And for me to be able to even sit here today and share my experience and story with you today, they were willing to do that and go to that level of a battle, of a fight, and they weren't willing to stand down. And for me, that's really impactful because it reminds me that every day I have an obligation as a Black woman. I have an obligation as a citizen of this country to do the same. Maybe not throw Molly cocktails, but I stand on the shoulder of giants, and that I have a legacy to carry on because there are people who are coming after me, and there's still a long way to go in this country, and there's still things that we have to fix, we have to mend and heal from and grow into. So that was my experience. Those are my perspective from the trip. Again, if you have the chance, go. It's amazing. It's nothing like what you were reading in a book. It doesn't compare. You need to sit down with these people, hear their stories, hear the tone in their voice, hear about what they were willing to put on the line for you and I. It really changes your life. It helps you see the world differently. And I think that's so important, is to be able to always be willing to be open and ready and listen to other people's stories, because I think that's what makes us human, and that's what makes us connect. So yeah, definitely, if you get the opportunity to go, I would say go. But yes, thank you for the opportunity to share my story, share my experience, and if I could do it again, I would. If y'all would accept me back into college, I'll go back for free. But nevertheless, thank you so much.
And I went back, and I'm looking going, what do they think they gonna do to me? I had to hide in a little cave out at Miss Kegler's house until Charlie Cobb and Ivan O'Donnell came out there to pick me up. And I went back, but I went back to West Tally, where I met the Brewer family who was fully armed. But I went back singing, ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking. I'm marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let the Ku Klux Klan turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let the Ku Klux Klan turn me round. Keep on walking, keep on talking. I'm marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let Haley Barber turn me round, oh, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let Haley Barber turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let Miss, I ain't gonna say her name. Turn me round, turn me round, oh, turn me round. Ain't gonna let Mayor Word turn me round. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let this education turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let this education turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking. I'm gonna build a brand new world.
Hi, my name is Breanne Palmer, and I'm a 2013 graduate of the University of Florida. and I was on the 2011 trip to the Mississippi Delta with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. That trip changed my life, it radicalized me, and it brought everything I was learning in the classroom to life. I remember meeting the late Margaret Block, who taught us about her role in SNCC and about being a freedom singer and about freedom songs. And I will never forget being able to spend so much time with her while she was with us in this life. And I still have a copy of Their Eyes Are Watching God that she signed for me as a gift. And so I can't describe how important the Mississippi Delta trip was to me personally, to my development as a student, as a person, and now as a lawyer doing immigration work, specifically work for Black immigrants. So thank you so much to SPOP. Thank you to Dr. Ortiz. Thank you to everyone who has been involved with the Mississippi Delta trip. And I'm looking forward to more years and more memories of these incredible trips and these amazing experiences. Thank you.
We've been built down, we've been scorned, we've been talked about as sure as you born, but we'll never turn back. No, we'll never turn back until we've all been freed and we have equality. No, we'll never turn back. We have hung our heads and cried for those like Lee who died. He died for you and he died for me. He died for the cause of equality. No, we'll never turn back. We have walked through the shadows of death, and we had to walk all by ourselves. No, we'll never turn back until we've all been freed and we have equality. No, we'll never turn back. We have spent our time in jail with no money for to go our bail, but we'll never turn back. No, we'll never turn back.
Hi, my name is Diana Dombrowski. I was a field researcher with the Mississippi Freedom Project from 2012 to 2015, during a period where it was growing a great deal and was led and coordinated by Sarah Blanc in partnership with the Sunflower County Civil Rights Organization. One of the most meaningful experiences for me was getting to learn from Margaret Block. She led us on tours of the Delta every year, and those tours were unforgettable. She was hilarious, an amazing poet, and had a devastatingly sharp wit that I still recall when I am facing personal or professional problems and wondering what the best thing to do is. And I carry her memory with me because she drives home in every way what the right thing is to do. And I was so moved by her example of hard work and daring and courage. And I'm really grateful to have learned from her. It was also hugely fun and rewarding to travel with people who became my friends year after year to the same place, getting to know the people there, getting to serve the goals of a group in the Delta. We weren't parachuting in. We were helping to record voices that we'd been asked to by a group who was already there and who was established. We were supplementing and complementing, and it was reciprocal to their efforts to memorialize what civil rights veterans did in the Delta there. I also think when it comes to the Mississippi Freedom Project mini grant that involved partnership with UF Smathers Libraries, this project really, more than any other I've worked on, followed the full scope of what's possible for an oral history project, where you partner with a community group, you work for them for many years, you work with them for many years. And so those interviews are recorded, they're archived, they're transcribed, and we know a lot of interviews get recorded. A lot of great project ideas are put out into the world. An even smaller amount get transcribed. And a way smaller amount ever get condensed into something that a researcher or someone in the public can access. And then even smaller than that, do they come in a guide for researchers and teachers to access and learn from those memories easily. And it was really rewarding to be part of a project that ended up getting to that final pinnacle stage, and recognition from the Oral History Association with the Elisabeth B. Mason Small Project Award was really special, because for everyone who participated on the project, this became such a passion and a deeply meaningful effort. I think that a lot of people would have stayed involved in the project whether or not any money or recognition ever came in, because the opportunity to talk to people who had given so much of their time and their life to the civil rights movement was staggeringly moving opportunity. So just about anyone who's participated in this project really falls in love with it. And to know that the outside world of professionals and academics working to do similar projects recognize the effort and time that went into making it something really great was so gratifying for those of us who had been involved in the project in a serious way. So I am really grateful, because being part of that arc of the project growing, of the mini grant that got all of these interviews transcribed, so many of them, and then finally saw those interviews turn into a compiled guide, which Sarah put together, really informs the way I want to do oral history and fieldwork in the future, in this reciprocal way, where education is a shared goal between people that I work with and the goals that I have for a project. The goals are never static. It's really important to think about the long term as we try to learn from the past and ensure that those lessons are really amplified for the future. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I had so much fun at Airport Grocery, visiting with Margaret Block, touring Natchez, going to Macomb, visiting the Sunflower County Freedom Project, which was a growth of the original freedom schools developed during the civil rights movement. The true effort and depth of devotion that civil rights veterans showed in their lives is really bearing fruit. It was a great privilege to be able to record and document some of those outcomes, especially the Sunflower County Freedom Project. Talking to those kids was really special. So,
oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more lynchings, no more lynchings, no more lynchings over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No injustice, no injustice, no injustice over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more Jim Crow, no more Jim Crow, no more Jim Crow over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
Hello, my name is Chelsea Carnes. I am an UF alumni, SPOP alumni. I attended and participated in the 2013 Mississippi Delta oral history trip, and it was an incredibly formative, amazing experience for me. I got to meet civil rights activists who devoted their lives to fighting for equality in the South. I met people like Margaret Block. I remember I was one of the only people on the trip who was old enough to drive the rental car, so I got to go pick her up and drop her off and spend one-on-one time with her, and I just so fascinated by her life and the her legacy, and just hearing firsthand stories of what people went through to fight for equal rights in the South. It was a trip that could be fun, goofing off in the car, talking about music, learning about Dr. Ortiz's taste in hip hop, and it was a very long car ride. We got to know each other well. But it could also be, it was a trip that could be devastating. We visited the Emmett Till Museum. We learned about some of the real horror and terrible history of events that have taken place in the South. It was a trip that allowed students to have professional experience collecting oral histories. We were firsthand meeting and talking to people who'd lived through an incredible time, collecting histories that without oral history and the process of oral history collection might never be heard, and bringing those back to Gainesville to store in the oral history collection at the University of Florida. So it was just an incredible experience on many levels. I'd recommend SPOP and this experience and others like it that SPOP provides to anyone. It was great for me. I've gone on to become an educator myself after my experiences with SPOP, and got my master's, and now I teach, and I am affected and better for the experiences I had at the Samuel Proctor Oral History program, and particularly my experience visiting the Mississippi Delta. Thanks.
It was indeed a pleasure to have worked with the Samuel Proctor Oral History program.
When we were in the planning stages of developing a project to share oral history in Macomb, Mississippi, we flew out to Florida to get a better overview of how Dr. Ortiz and his staff had developed the program. Dr. Ortiz and staff provided the guidance and support we needed to get the Macomb Legacies Project off the ground and running. Our collaboration with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program led to the success of the Macomb Legacies Project, leading students to compete on a national level sharing oral history. It was also an honor to have received the Martha Ross Teaching Award for the work we did in collaboration with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. This would not have been possible without the guidance and support from the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. Falana McDaniel, Macomb Legacies Project, Macomb, Mississippi.
And this is my song. I sing it everywhere. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. And I'm gonna keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, I'm marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let the KKK turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let the KKK turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, I'm marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let injustice turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let injustice turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, I'm marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let Ross Barnett turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let Ross Barnett turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, I'm marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let no governor turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let no governor turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, I'm marching up the freedom land.
I'm Annemarie Anderson, and I attended the Mississippi Freedom Project fieldwork trip in 2014, 2015, and 2016. One of the most memorable parts of MFP for me was attending the 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer in Sunflower County, Mississippi. It was truly remarkable to be in the presence of the volunteers who spent the summer of 1964 registering people to vote and running freedom schools. It's one thing to learn about the civil rights movement in the classrooms of King Flint, but it's an entirely different thing to be in the presence of those agents of change. The experience impacted me like few other experiences in my life have, and I'm really grateful to have been a part of it.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, Lord, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Oh, all over Mississippi. I'm gonna let it shine all over Mississippi. I'm gonna let it shine all over Mississippi. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Well, I got the light of freedom, and I'm gonna let it shine. I've got the light of freedom, and I'm gonna let it shine. I've got the light of freedom, and I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, Lord, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Well, tell Mitt Romney that I'm gonna let it shine. Tell Mitt Romney that I'm gonna let it shine. Tell Mitt Romney I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, Lord.
So I'm Matthew Simmons. I just wanted to share a couple thoughts about my Mississippi Freedom Trip experience. Overall, it was pretty incredible getting to engage and interact with folks who had participated in some aspect of the civil rights movement, right? So understanding their lived experiences, listening to their stories. One individual in particular who stands out was a woman who was disowned by her family because she had friendships with Black people. And in fact, they sent her away to school for juvenile delinquents because of this. And so it was really interesting hearing that experience. Another gentleman, talked about his experience with the B.B. King Museum and, mentoring youth when he was a small business owner. And so just really interesting hearing about different stories from different communities. And more importantly than that, seeing undergraduates get excited about doing history, right? So I went as a PhD student, but there were a lot of undergraduates on the trip, and seeing them kind of grow intellectually and again get excited by the process of doing history. And for many of them, connecting with folks who had been active in earlier, social movements, the civil rights movement, I think spurred on their own interest in getting involved in contemporary social movements. So overall, a pretty incredible experience. Whenever you, put a number of people in close quarters in vans, it makes for really interesting conversations. But again, this is the kind of work that, every college student, undergraduate or graduate should really be able to do and should have access to do, because it puts a lot of the things learned in the classroom into practice. And it allows for an opportunity, again, to, talk to real people about their experiences, fighting segregation, fighting racism. And certainly, the memories from this trip are something that I will continue to appreciate for the rest of my life. And they've certainly impacted me as an oral historian. Thank you.
Participating in the Mississippi Freedom Project trip with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program was the single most formative part of my college experience. I would dare to say that most of those lucky enough to get into a white van outside of Pugh Hall early on a summer morning to make the trip out to Mississippi would say the same. The trip changes you. It forces you to reckon with the brittleness of the official narrative about the civil rights movement. The real legacy is more painful and still unfinished, but also you get a sense of the incredible bravery and resolve of the organizers and educators and activists and community members that were willing to confront an unjust system. It's an honor that these communities, especially the elders, would welcome us into their homes. They would sit down with us and allow their memories to be recorded, even the most painful ones. All of this would have been impossible without Margaret Block. I hope she's smiling up in heaven, knowing that we're still talking about her after so many years. What a force of nature she was, with her dry humor and willingness to tell you exactly how she felt about you. One of my favorite moments was sitting in a pizza restaurant in some backroad Mississippi town with Miss Margaret reciting her fiery, truth-telling poetry without a care in the world who heard. That's still a moment that inspires me, to be honest, and to always honor the legacy of those that fought to make this country a little bit more just. And I'm really happy to have been part of this trip, and I'm really happy to have been asked to give a couple of my thoughts, and I hope that this is a good program.
Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain to let my people go. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain to let my people go. This is your boy, let my people go, okay? Who's that yonder dressed in red? Let my people go. It must be the children Bob Moses led. Let my people go. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain to let my people go. Who's that yonder dressed in white? Let my people go. It must be the children for their equal rights. Let my people go. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain to let my people go. Who's that yonder dressed in black? Let my people go. It must be. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Well, we woke up this morning with my mind, Lord, stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Where we preaching and singing the mind stayed on freedom. Well, preaching and singing with my mind stored, stayed on freedom. Preaching and singing with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, Hallelujah. Well, I'm walking and talking with my mind. Stayed on freedom. Well, I'm walking and talking with my mind, Lord. Stayed on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind. Stayed on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Oh, where you walk, walk, or where you talk, talk, or with your mind on freedom. Walk, walk, talk, talk, or with your mind on freedom. Walk, walk, or where you talk, talk, or with your mind.
My name is Oliver Telusma. I was a project coordinator for the Latino Diaspora in the Americas Project, and I went on the trip in 2017, and I served as co-coordinator of the trip alongside Nicole Yap in 2018. The opportunity to go on this trip was nothing short of a life-changing experience for me, between working under the tutelage of Dr. Ortiz and working with the elders in the community, both in Tallahassee and in Alabama and Mississippi. Truly life-changing experience, and I would highly encourage that anybody interested in taking this trip make every opportunity and take every opportunity to do so.
We've been talked about as sure as you born, but we'll never turn back. No, we'll never turn back until we've all been freed and we have equality. No, we'll never turn back. We have hung our heads and cried for those like Lee who died. He died for you and he died for me. He died for the cause of equality. No, we'll never turn back. We have walked through the shadows of death, and we had to walk all by ourselves. No, we'll never turn back until we've all been freed and we have equality. No, we'll never turn back. We have spent our
Hi, my name is Cheyenne Cheng. I was part of the Mississippi Freedom Project back in 2018. When it came to expectations and like what motivated me to be part of the trip, I had just recently joined SPOP as the Art of Aging coordinator, and so I was talking to some of my colleagues at SPOP, and they were like, hey, like if you're not doing anything, you should join on this project. We're gonna go to Mississippi and do some other things. And I was like, sure, why not? I came into it not really knowing much about what the project was gonna be doing. I just knew that we would be collecting interviews and we would be working with community members and that I would be taking photos. So yeah, that's kind of what I sort of came into it with in terms of my perspective of the experience. So I'm a second generation Asian American. My parents immigrated here back in like 91, and so I don't really know the history of the South as well as I think I should, and so I saw this trip as an opportunity to learn more about the South, the things that happened back with the Mississippi Freedom Project or Freedom Summer. One of the most surprising discoveries for me was that a lot of it felt like the civil rights era was so far away, but in reality a lot of those things happened pretty recently in history, or that the effects of it still are felt today, right? So one of the most impactful events or things that we did was go on the Emmett Till Trail and to go there and to see where he was, what happened to him, and the river where his body was dumped, and seeing the trail and how there was this sign that would say this is the river where Emmett Till was body was dumped or wherever, and there were gunshots that were obvious, people had obviously shot into the sign, and you could see all those bullet holes, and it was wow, these people can't let these sort of things go. And it kind of brings me back to one of the questions that Mr. Burr sent, which was how has your view of history changed? And I think through this trip I realized the history that we're taught in school is very fragmented and it's very simplified, and this trip kind of taught me that history is very complex. Through those interviews that I listened in on and did, learning about trying to get people the ability to vote was dangerous, right? It wasn't this glamorous thing. It was a thing that people were risking their lives for. And then seeing too, one of the other very important or very impactful things that we did was go to the Legacy Museum that kind of connected slavery to the Jim Crow era to now with mass incarceration, and again with showing how history is taught very fragmented, seeing how these things sort of connect to the things that we see now, especially now with the Black Lives Matter movement and such. I think another thing that I learned from this trip was that culture takes a very long time to change, right? Emmett Till was killed in 1955, and there were still people that were putting gunshots or shooting into a sign about a river where he was thrown. Why is that so important to these people, right? And this country has a very long history with racism and killing, lynching Black people in particular, and we still sort of see that today. It's just a different name, it's a different way of doing things. So for example, I now work at an Asian American civil rights organization, and I have the honor and privilege to work with some of the people that were part of the original Mississippi Freedom organizations that were part of the Mississippi Freedom Summer, which, for example, the NAACP, and now I'm also working with some of the more newer organizations that we met on the trip, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and seeing how these groups are still doing the work today, some of it being voting, some of it just being racial justice or hate. And so, this trip was very impactful for me because I learned not only what field work looked like, but really understanding how history plays a part in these people's everyday lives. And also seeing how field work, when you do it, it should be in community and with community. I think one of the things that Dr. Ortiz had very much stressed to our cohort was that if you do field work, we don't, SPOP does field work in communities that ask that we be there, right? We shouldn't be going to communities we think that are cool and just doing the work without really working with the community and giving them access to the things that we do, right? In Natchez, we were working directly with them to find these documents, to help them archive things, and it's really important that when we help them with their history, we give them access to the things that that is theirs. I think specifically with Mississippi and the Mississippi Delta, there's this history of a lot of people coming in, trying to understand what's going on, doing these documentaries, and then the people of the Mississippi Delta just get nothing. They don't get any money from these documentaries. They don't get access to any of the interviews that they were part of, and that's really a shame to those communities, right? They give you access to their story, and I think that this trip does a really good job of not only giving people the outlet to tell their story, but actually having access to that story so that the community can use it for their own good, outside of what SPOP does, right? And so I think those were just a couple of the things that are that I saw that I think would be really important for, or a benefit to people who are interested in this trip. So, yeah.
Hello, I am E. Stanley Richardson, Poet Laureate, Alachua County, Florida. Back in 2018, I had the wonderful opportunity to travel with the University of Florida Samuel Proctor Oral History Program on their annual Mississippi Freedom Project. I can best describe it as an intergenerational educational excursion through the heart of the South. We left Gainesville, traveled to Tallahassee, Florida, on to Montgomery, Alabama, and throughout the Mississippi Delta. I thoroughly enjoyed sharing in the enthusiasm and the excitement of the young students as they absorbed all of that rich history. But I think what I cherished most about that trip was being in the company of a veteran, an elder of the civil rights movement, as she retraced some of her footsteps when she was a student at Spelman at the height of the civil rights movement, participating in marches and freedom rides and sit-ins. Dr. Gwendolyn Zahara Simmons, whose conversation and wise reflection during that trip I will cherish forever. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Paul Ortiz, for your brilliant instruction. Thank you to your staff and everyone at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. Continued success. God bless.
Jesus is on the main line. Tell him what you want. Jesus is on the main line. Tell him what you want. Jesus is on the main line. Tell him what you want. Just call him up and tell him what you want. Well, Jesus is on the main line. Tell him what you want. Jesus is on the main line. Tell him what you want. Jesus is on the main line. Tell him what you want. Just call him up and tell him what you want. Oh, if you want your freedom, tell him what you want. If you want your freedom, tell him what you want. If you want your freedom, tell him what you want. Just call him up and tell him what you want. Oh, Jesus is on the main line. Tell him what you want. Jesus is on the main line. Tell him what you want. Jesus is on the main line. Tell him what you want. Just call him up and tell him what you want. Oh, if you want your equal rights, tell him what you want. If you want your equal
Welcome everyone to my Mississippi Freedom Trip. My name is Amanda Baret and I'm so excited to share my journey with you all. This past summer, I had the opportunity to visit several cities documenting African American history. This summer initiative is focused on activism and conducting interviews with veterans of the civil rights movement and notable residents of the Mississippi Delta. I participated in this event because I wanted to stop desensitizing myself from Black history. Georgetown Law thrives on the philosophy cura personalis, care for the whole person. But I firmly believe in order to do this, one must have historical competency and cultural empathy in order to take care of one another. And that is a unique perspective I bring as a diverse applicant. If granted the opportunity to be admitted, I would love to share more of my stories with you all in person. Thank you.
Hi, My name is Abby Lovett, and I am a senior history major here at UF. I participated in the 2019 Mississippi Freedom Project after taking a class with Dr. Ortiz, and was shocked at how much perspective it offered me as a new history major. Growing up in the Florida Panhandle, I thought I was familiar with the Mississippi River Delta region and its history, but while participating in the Mississippi Freedom Project, I was able to see how this history is perpetuated through the years and continues to impact the day-to-day lives of the region's residents. The stop that had the greatest impact on me was our visit to the Equal Justice Initiative Museum and Lynching Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. Although I was well aware of the issue of mass incarceration before the trip, the EJI laid out the progression of the institution as a form of second slavery. The experience led me to study criminal justice in my later coursework at UF and inspired the topic of my thesis, which discusses a juvenile correctional institute near my hometown in the Florida Panhandle. In addition to inspiring a newfound interest in the criminal justice system, participating in the Mississippi Freedom Project gave me my first hands-on experience with collecting oral history interviews. I learned the power of oral histories as a tool for preserving valuable memories and experiences that would otherwise be lost. I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to participate in this valuable fieldwork experience, and I sincerely hope that many more future students to come will be able to participate in this project.
The Elaine Legacy Center's mission is to research, preserve, and share the oral histories of descendants still living in the area of the killing fields of 1919. Building on the foundation of faith, values, and determination of our forebears, we are building our village as a center of Delta spirituality, culture, art, music, and education, so that pilgrims and tourists will find meaning here. We appreciate Dr. Paul Ortiz and University of Florida students and staff who came with him and eagerly await their post-COVID return. They listened to our stories, recorded them, and then made them available to us. One recording is on our website, which is ElaineLegacyCenter.org, and others are used as needed. Unlike so many others who come to Elaine, Dr. Ortiz was sure everyone understood. You do not try to change our stories to fit what you say happened in Elaine. Unlike many others who come to Elaine, you do not try to make money for yourself from our stories and leave. Instead, you come with academic integrity, a respect for all of us, no matter how poor we are, and you leave us with a little more pride and hope for our future. Written by Dr. Mary Olson, Elaine Legacy Center, Elaine, Arkansas.
Hello, my name is Elisabeth Rios-Brooks. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Florida, and I had the privilege of going on the Mississippi Freedom Project fieldwork trip in the summer of 2019. And it was such an incredible experience being able to drive throughout so much of the South, so much that I had never seen before. But I think that the most important experience that I had was when we got to Elaine, Arkansas, because it was the centennial of the Elaine massacre. And having the opportunity to speak with folks whose family members had passed away at the massacre or who had memories, who had passed on memories of that massacre was really, really impactful. Particularly when we were speaking with one individual in particular who took us to the place where they had planted a tree where it was thought that there was a large mass grave. And I remember feeling so moved in that moment, and it was very overwhelming. And I remember taking pictures and video of that tree, only to a few days later, after we got back to UF, find out that somebody had chopped it down. And that footage that I had taken was some of the last footage of that tree. And I was really, really struck and I think really shocked that somebody would consider, chopping such a tree down. And I think it just goes to show how much, resentment there still is, how much anger, how much racism still exists, even, 100 years later. And so I will never forget that moment. I will never forget that trip. And I am so deeply grateful to the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, to the University of Florida, for being able to extend that invitation to me and to go on such a memorable trip that I will just never forget. And I will always hold very, very close to my heart. Thank you.
are descendants of the largest racial massacre in U.S. history. Today, out of the sacred memory spaces of our hearts and our lands arise a people called Elaine. A people determined to create a different world. A people without resources, but determined to build a world of equity for all people. For our children and our children's children. Equity that does not take from one to give to another, but to increase the quality of life for all. We may not change the world, but we will be a model for how the world can change. We are poor, among the poorest in the United States, living on some of the richest soils of the world. But we are determined to show the world how to move from poverty to equity. In today's language, we call it entrepreneur love, peace, and hope. Yesterday, our elders called it being God's hands and God's feet. This is to say, we don't just dream it will happen. God, through us, makes it happen. That is authentic Elaine. It means building on our sacred memory with determination to create equity for all.
Hello, my name is Ahmad Sanchez. I'm a fourth-year English major, and I went on the Mississippi trip in 2019. So going on a trip, you begin to realize that students aren't being taught the truth about history. African American studies and Black studies have been neglected, and students suffer because of that. It's something you don't realize until you on this trip. I began to understand what the war on drugs was, how the government has oppressed minoritized communities. By conducting oral history, I began to understand what civil rights activists had to sacrifice for equal opportunity, for the right to vote. I began to truly learn, what my primary education should have taught me. Mississippi trip allows students to comprehend what the civil rights movement is and inspires them to take action after. Listening to civil rights veterans inspires us to want change, because now it's our turn. It's because of this trip, I decided I want a career in academia because, I know I'm not being taught everything, so I want to learn it so I can give it out to others and have it readily available. My friends who went on a trip are now organizers or want to be civil rights lawyers. This trip benefits everyone. Because to be part of this trip is to be part of history and appreciate the activists that came before us, and besides the research aspect, you develop a bond with these people. You become really close and you're able to bounce off ideas off each other and truly have an experiential kind of learning that isn't offered in the classroom. So this trip is probably one of the best experiences I had at UF. I will carry these memories with me for a long time because, I've grown from it. I've learned from it. I've made friends from it, and the Samuel Proctor Oral History program. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to go there, go to the Mississippi Delta and learn. I hope you enjoy the rest of the presenters and presentations, and thank you for listening.
Walk with me, Lord, walk with me. Walk with me, Lord, walk with me. While I'm on this freedom journey. I want Jesus to walk with me. Make a way for me now, Lord. Make a way for me. Make a way for me now, Lord. Make a way for me. While I'm on this freedom journey, I want Jesus to walk with me. Thank you. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, Lord, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Oh, all over Mississippi, I'm gonna let it shine. All over Mississippi, I'm gonna let it shine. All over Mississippi, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Well, I got the light of freedom, and I'm gonna let it shine. I've got the light of freedom, and I'm gonna let it shine. I've got the light of freedom, and I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
The Elaine Legacy Center's mission is to research, preserve, and share the oral histories of descendants still living in the area of the killing fields of 1919. Building on the foundation of faith, values, and determination of our forebears, we are building our village as a center of Delta spirituality, culture, art, music, and education, so that pilgrims and tourists will find meaning here. We appreciate Dr. Paul Ortiz and University of Florida students and staff who came with him and eagerly await their post-COVID return. They listened to our stories, recorded them, and then made them available to us. One recording is on our website, which is ElaineLegacyCenter.org, and others are used as needed. Unlike so many others who come to Elaine, Dr. Ortiz was sure everyone understood. You do not try to change our stories to fit what you say happened in Elaine. Unlike many others who come to Elaine, you do not try to make money for yourself from our stories and leave. Instead, you come with academic integrity, a respect for all of us, no matter how poor we are, and you leave us with a little more pride and hope for our future. Written by Dr. Mary Olson, Elaine Legacy Center, Elaine, Arkansas.
Peace and blessings, y'all, at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program of the University of Florida. My person is so happy to be able to make a few comments about how your Mississippi Delta program has helped to record and document most valuable modern civil and human rights history by on each occasion filming live interviews of the persons who were the actual makers of the history and the events. My person has spent the last 25 years intensively leading an advocacy equal history program aimed at preservation of America's domestic slave trade from the upper Old South down to the Southwest via chattel slavery selling markets at Natchez, Mississippi. And concurrently implementing annual living history programs about the roles and history of self-emancipated runaway enslaved who served as freedom fighters in the Union Army during the Civil War. SPOHP was a God-sent blessing for my person here in Hidden History, Mississippi. Y'all provided the kind of progressive-minded and brave folks much needed to capture the modern civil rights history and personalities that lay dominant and dying in both Mississippi and Louisiana. It was a pleasure to work with UF students of multicultural and racial origins from across the world, just like my person had been used to doing for 35 years living in California. Staff was the same, and both students and staff made for a social justice movement of the kind my person teamed up with to rescue endangered humanity and history via SPOHP. Written by
Sir Sesh Ab Hetir C.M. Boxley.
Read by Cedric Sawyer.
I was first introduced to the Samuel Proctor Oral History program at Delta State University in Cleveland, Mississippi, where they were conducting a panel discussion on local civil rights activism. I was hooked. Then and there, I became an SPOHP groupie, attending, supporting, promoting, praising, all things associated with the program. I could not say how many panel discussions I attended, but I can say that I was spellbound each time. They made it a pleasure to learn. The wealth of the knowledge they provided, the depth of their commitment, and the enthusiasm they demonstrated always created a welcome air of excitement. When the Oral History program agreed to come to Vicksburg, Mississippi to conduct interviews on local civil rights activists in the 60s and 70s, I was elated. Vicksburg is well known for its Confederate history and somewhat known for its Reconstruction history, but there is no documented record of its civil rights history, of which there is plenty. What an honor and opportunity to have the Samuel Proctor Oral History program conduct interviews in Vicksburg as part of their field research. Publicity was done, and the response was overwhelming, so much so that the team had to conclude the interviews the following year. Several of those interviewed played key roles in the movement decades ago and have recently passed on, so I am especially grateful that their stories have been preserved for future generations. In addition to their interviews, the research team also recorded video footage of the historic Beulah Cemetery as part of a documentary about cemeteries. There was also a presentation on incorporating and teaching African American history in high school. Last but not least, there were team members themselves. What a fabulous group. How Dr. Ortiz can assemble such an efficient, cohesive group of individuals devoted to a single cause is beyond comprehension. Not only that, there are some of the nicest, most personable, and thoughtful people you'll ever meet. They, too, were a hit. The entire town is still asking if and when they will be back. Because there was not enough time to interview everyone who expressed interest, the team carved out a little time the following summer to finish up the interviews. Dr. Ortiz assembled another delightful and well-informed team to conduct interviews and to lead panel discussions. It was during this time that Dr. Ortiz did his book discussion, An African American and Latinx History of the United States, and book signing at Laura Lee Bookstore in Vicksburg. The attentive audience followed up with the thought-provoking questions and lively discussion. A most rewarding time was enjoyed by all. The Samuel Proctor Oral History Project encourages growth and understanding of and within our community through firsthand accounts of individual experiences that cannot be obtained elsewhere. It is through these personal narratives that enable us to more fully comprehend the facts of our written history and therefore more fully comprehend our place within that history. The value of such information is beyond measure. Written by Georgine Clark, read by Imaya Munjin.
my father and them always taught us that self-defense is the first law of nature. Yeah, then I used to have me a little switchblade knife. It kept it in the pocket of my skirts or whatever I had on. And I knew how to pull it out, and I was going to stick a sheriff in the eye one day over there in Tallahatchie County. Because he said what he was going to do to me, and I told him I'd get you before you get me. And when I popped that knife out, well, that time, we was at the courthouse, so the Justice Department was watching the whole thing, John Doe. So they came up there and told me to go back over there. I went, well, you just saved his life. But then the night of the shootout, they were making Molotov cocktails, and Miss Brewer was in the kitchen too, trying to pull the gas in the bottles, and her hands was shaking, and she was wasting gas everywhere. I'm going, okay. And Ed Brown was looking at me, and he said, do you know if she had set this house on fire, they'd have swore the Klan killed us, burned us out. And it would have been Miss Brewer wasting all this gas up in here. That time I'd left SCLC and was working for SNCC. Yeah. And I came and, was going around people. I noticed every time they'd see me coming and go in the house and close the door. And they didn't have air conditioners. And it was extremely hot. But I kept going, I went, they just scared, I'm going to keep on. If they see me every day, then they'll come, they'll start talking. The third day I was there, somebody came and found me and told me I got to run back over to the funeral home. And I'm going, what happened? What? I got to everybody sitting up there looking so crazy, and I'm going, damn, what I do? Good. But I had to, the Klan had put the word out that they were going to get me. I had to get in the back of that hearse and go out on Creek Road with Miss Kegler and hide until somebody from the Greenwood office came and picked me up. And Mrs. Hamo, I admired her the way she just left off of that plantation and didn't look back. The best thing they could have done was let her vote and kept her on that plantation, because she came off of that plantation and brought the world, got attention, the world's attention about what was going on. Well, I guess I was born to do it. I don't know, it's just I'm the type of person that I think injustice in any form is wrong, and I'm going to try to do something about it. If it's injustice it's not good for the person that's perpetrating the racism, and it's not good for us that's on the receiving end, because the person that's perpetrating the racism, they are ignorant, and they need to get an education. And then on the other hand, we need to get an education. We better start educating our children ourselves, and don't trust the public schools to educate them, especially when it comes to their own history.